Pittsburgh Steeler fans, what is going on? It's Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, here with you as always for another episode of the Steelers Preview. That's right, it's Thursday, and we're starting to really gear up for the upcoming game. And as everyone knows, the Steelers play the New Orleans Saints down in the Big Easy in Week 16. There's a lot to talk about, and we're going to break it down for you the way we always do. But we has changed. We is not Jeff and Brian. Brian's out gallivanting around in California somewhere. And so I welcome another contributor to the website, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, Dave Schofield. Dave, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm doing as best as I can. I'm ready for this game.
Yeah, now if you've heard that name before, it's because Dave is the one that is constantly feeding Brian and myself statistics that we read on the air, whether it's on the Standard as a Standard or whether it's on the preview show. He's an active member in the live chat on YouTube. So if you recognize the name, now you get a face with the name. Brian does write for the site, does great work. So Brian, I have to ask you, or I'm sorry, I called you Brian. Dave, this is going to take a little bit. I apologize. Dave, I have to ask you right off the bat, what is your first gut instinct on this upcoming game? You were at the game last week in Pittsburgh, Heinz Field. Talk a little bit about the atmosphere last week, and then what do you think will happen this week? Do you think some of that mojo might parlay over into next week?
I am definitely looking for some of that mojo to keep going. That was the most electric I've ever seen Heinz Field. There was a lady sitting next to me with two young boys. She was from California, and she had the boys there for their first game. And when the scoreboard went black with 2 minutes left for them to kick off Renegade, I just turned to the boys and say, "You are never going to forget this.
That's
So
true.
pay attention." And that was the most memorable Renegade I've ever had because you couldn't hear a thing. It was so crazy.
Now hold on. Now you're a season ticket holder, correct?
That's correct.
And how long have you had season tickets?
Let's see. I got my tickets when they put in the extra seats. So I think this is 4 years now.
Okay. All right. So you missed some of the memorable ones. Like I'm thinking of, Ravens, Steelers, AFC Championship, Renegade. I think the one that sticks out to me, and I was not there for it, but I remember it, is when they did double Renegade against the Cowboys in 2008. That was leading up to the Super Bowl run, and that was when Tony Romo threw the pick six to Deshae Townsend, and then Heath Miller ended up scoring. I'm sure you remember that game. They did a double Renegade there. I heard the place was going nuts. But you said it was rocking, and that's the loudest you ever heard the stadium, right?
That's correct. Like I said, I can only go by what I've been there for.
Awesome. Well, I'm jealous because that's awesome. I wish I would have been there. Have duties to take care of here in town and with the website. You have to understand that. But nonetheless, what are your thoughts on this upcoming week? The Steelers Saints. Do you think they match up well? Do you think it's a matchup nightmare? We're going to talk about key matchups here in a second, but just your general thoughts on the upcoming game.
Uh, well, you almost can't even look at this game without looking at last week. Mainly because I felt going into last week that was going to be the defining moment of the season. They were either going to finally take down the Patriots, start winning some games again, and carry it through into the playoffs, or they were going to fall short again and just kind of fade off into oblivion. And they did what they needed to do. They won the game, and now they're moving forward. I One of the things I like the most about this game coming up is how they are not favored, how much of an underdog they are, because I would be more leery with the letdown after the Patriots if they were not if they were favored to win. But since they're not favored, I think it's a little bit different attitude moving forward of, hey, you know what? Don't believe in us. That's fine. We're going to come show you what it's about.
Yeah, underdog role, man. I think they can thrive on that. They don't experience that too much anymore. In a situation where I think you could get that disrespect factor. The line has jumped everywhere from 7 to 5.5 in some cases. I think you could absolutely pump up no one, like you said, no one's believing that we can do this. We just beat the Patriots. They were the AFC representative in the Super Bowl last year. Here's something that I would be interested in. I don't think you know this off the top of your head, although I might be wrong. I would be curious when the last time in, we'll say, the last 5 years, the Steelers were underdogs 2 straight weeks, because they were They weren't favored last week against New England, and they're not favored this week against the Saints. That would be a curious statistic. You don't know that, do you? If you do, my mind might explode.
I do not know that one, but that is a great one that I think as soon as we're done here tonight, you do this to me all the time. You put these ideas in my head, and then I've got to follow through. I've got to figure out the answer to
Yeah.
it. So
Well,
I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight till I figure that one out.
well, I'm glad because for me, I'm an ideas guy. Like I think of the idea. I don't want to do that work. I don't want to go through Pro Football Reference and find all these years of data. That's what you're for. That's why I brought you on the staff. You're my guy, man. You're my stats guy. That's what I like.
And hey, anytime you just give me the idea and I'll roll with it.
All right, so let's get started here tonight. As you know, because I know you listen to the show, and if anyone's listening for the first time, what we do is we break down the upcoming game by three key matchups. We each give our three one at a time, and then obviously some of them could be very specific, like player versus player. Some could be more general, and some might be like those intangibles, like being an underdog or something like that. We keep it loose here, is what I'm saying. And anytime you're doing anything with Brian Davis, you have to keep it loose because that's just how he functions. So I know he's not going to listen to this, so I don't care. All right. So, you're the guest. I'll give you a chance to go first.
I don't want to mess up the mojo.
I don't even know how that 3-game losing streak messed up so much mojo. I don't even know who's supposed to go first, but I think I went first last week, but I didn't in something. It doesn't matter. Just go ahead and go. What's your first key matchup for this upcoming game?
All right. Well, this one for me is obvious because it's near and dear to my heart, and that is the offensive line of the Steelers going up against that number one, number two ranked rush defense of the Saints. That the Saints are number one in rushing yards given up on the season with 1,107, and they're number two with yards per rush that they've given up. With the only team that's ahead of them, let's see, who is it? I think it's. Oh man, I can't believe I don't know that one, but I do know that it's 3.68 yards per attempt that they give up. So with that stout run defense, it's really going to come down to the offensive line to open up those holes, much like they did last week, in order to at least have some semblance of a running game.
That's a good one. And I think that's where if you're like me and you're thinking to yourself, okay, where are the real matchups lying? It's going to be offensively, it's going to be that line. But I'm going to piggyback and kind of add on to that a little bit for my first key matchup, and mine's going to be balance. I think when you look at the statistics that you just rattled off about the New Orleans Saints defensive front and how good they are against the run, that a lot of people would say, well, let's just sling it. Let's just sling the rock. And I'm not saying that they won't, because if in fact, I actually think they probably will. But in my opinion, and Lance always laughs at me, he said, there's certainties in life, death, taxes, and Jeff talking about offensive balance for the Steelers. It's just what happens. And so I always think that it doesn't have to be 50-50, because I know that is with Ben Roethlisberger and Randy Fichtner calling the shots. I feel like that is an unattainable goal to be 50-50. But give me 60-40, and heck, maybe even, 65-35. I'd be happy with that. They just have to try and run the football. And I'm not talking about this half-ass stuff like they did in Oakland. I'm thinking you have to actually commit yourself to running the football, because if not, you're gonna run into the hornet's nest that is that secondary, which can take the ball away, and they can get after the passer. So you can't be predictable. They need to go down there, and they don't need to run heavy looks. They need to be balanced, spread them out, try to run the football. I think this line can do it. I think they're going to have some time, to prepare. Saints are coming off a short week. They played on Monday Night Football, so take that for what it's worth. But that's my key matchup number one, is try to have some semblance of balance offensively. So, Dave, what do you think?
I like that notion. It's the Houston Texans, by the way, just so I can clear up on that one. That's got the best yards against. The one thing you have to remember with that is sometimes the stats are a little bit off. I pretty much feel that any pass where the ball is in the air for less than maybe 8 yards, or that's just a quick dump off to the running back, is basically a run. Mm-hmm. That sometimes I think we even saw it more last year than this year, that is the most effective running that we get, which is still technically off of a pass, which just allows the running back to clear that line of scrimmage and get into the open space right away. Where in essence it goes down as a pass play, but still it's a run play. So I think as long as you kind of include that into that balance, that's really something that they should be looking for.
Yeah, and that's something Ben Roethlisberger has spoken about during his media sessions is that those short screens, those quick hitter passes are really an extension of the running game. And so I agree with that. And that's why I said that I don't need 50-50. If those passes tend to be, if it's more, like I said, 60-40 or even 65-35%, I'm okay with that because I understand it's a throwing league. And right now, especially with James Conner not looking like he's going to play this week, the best chance for them to succeed is to move the ball down the field through the air. But at the same time, I do feel like it's important to also run the rock at the same time. So go ahead with your key matchup number 2 there, Dave.
All right. Well, this might seem like a bit of a cop out here, but I'm going to go again with the Steelers defensive line against the Saints beat up offensive line because the Saints I think they have 4 offensive linemen on the injury report. I think 2 didn't practice yesterday and 2 were limited. I think one of them came back to be limited today. So they have one offensive lineman that's still out and 3 that are limited. So it's hard to say what their offensive line is going to be looking like. So with the emergence of Javon Hargrave recently and Hayward and Tuitt have always just been, for the most part, studs up the middle. Just being able to just own that line of scrimmage is going to be the key, whether it's just trying to stuff the runs up the middle or, most importantly, getting pressure on Drew Brees from the middle.
Yeah. You're right. And we talked about this last night in the Standard is a Standard. Chris Carter joined us from DK Pittsburgh Sports about how, and Lance you piggybacked on this about how shorter quarterbacks, you want to really pressure them up the middle, get those big bodies in their face. They can't see as well. And Drew Brees is a great quarterback, but he's just not that tall. So I agree. That's a great matchup. For me, I'm going to kind of go outside the box here a little bit. If you hadn't paid attention today, one Cameron Jordan, defensive lineman for the New Orleans Saints today, it did something that's very rare anymore, except if your name's Jalen Ramsey. And Jalen Ramsey's been given bulletin board material since the offseason. But let's be honest, most teams, most coaches, they understand the game, and that is you don't give the other team anything that they can use for motivation, for that bulletin board material that we're talking about. And yet, here we go. Cameron Jordan says to Saints reporters from the New Orleans Saints website that he doesn't think that Ben Roethlisberger is a top 5 quarterback of his generation. And he even went as far as saying he would put Eli Manning ahead of Ben Roethlisberger. And so that really turned a lot of heads. I know it made my ears pucker up. I was like, really? Eli Manning? I understand Eli's won 2, but let's be honest, Ben's been a little bit more successful throughout his career than Manning, in my opinion. So, I mean, all this stuff's going on. I just think that if I'm looking at a matchup, it's the offensive line versus Jordan, but it's also Big Ben going out there and throwing some touchdowns and looking at that guy in the face saying, hey, who's Hall of Fame now? And I don't think Roethlisberger cares. I really don't, because his resume is his resume. Early in his career, when he won the Super Bowls and made it to a third, a lot of people, it was always the and but, he had a good defense, but he didn't have this or that, whatever the case may be. Now he has the statistics to back it up in terms of yardage, 500-yard games, 6 touchdown games, 400-yard games, all that stuff that we hear now almost ad nauseum when he has a big game. If there's a time for Big Ben to kind of go loose, you think this is the perfect setting outside of the fact that it's on the road, but you have a dome, so you have good conditions on the turf, fast. I think that their personnel matches up well with New Orleans Saints, but it's just that Ben Roethlisberger, Cameron Jordan, that whole backstory going on. That's my matchup number 2. I know it's not really a matchup, but at the same time, it can be motivational. I think the Steelers, Marquise Pouncey today in the locker room after practice said all the right things about how he can say what he wants, blah, blah, blah. You know that pisses them off because it pisses me off and I'm just a fan. So, Dave, I'm sure you saw the video. It was posted by our contributor, Simon Chester. It kind of went viral. Everyone ESPN, all these major outlets wanted it because the Saints took it down right away and he had it. So, what were your thoughts on what Jordan had to say for Ben Roethlisberger?
I could pull Marquise Pouncey and say, you know what, say whatever you want to say, but really, I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. I mean, Ben is what Ben is. I know this is a "what have you done for me lately" league. That draft class of those three quarterbacks from 2004, always going to be compared to each other, and it was always, Ben's got two, Eli's got two, Rivers doesn't have any. Well, now Rivers is having a good year this year, and everyone wants to talk about, well, was he really the best quarterback of those three? They're just looking at right now. So, and it's so much more than just right now, because as we can see with Ben, right now changes from week to week all the time. I mean, in that game against Jacksonville in the regular season last year, after that game, trust me, no one wanted to put him in the Hall of Fame. But you have to look at it as a whole. It's so hard to talk about the Hall of Fame when someone's still playing. You really have to look at it. You know, that's probably the biggest reason why you have to wait 5 years before you're eligible, because you really need to put the career in perspective after it's already over.
No, you're right. You're right. And so I think that will be some motivation for the Steelers. Not that they would need any. They're going to know a lot before they even play this game on Sunday. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's get to your third key matchup, Dave. What is your final matchup for this upcoming game?
All right, here's one out of the box for you as well. Since you did it, I'll do it.
There you go.
I'm going to go with Mike Tomlin versus his second half timeouts.
Oh boy.
Because the last 2 weeks have driven me crazy. You don't think about the one from the Patriots game because this time it worked out. But what are you doing calling a timeout 2 weeks in a row on fourth down on defense with the clock stopped when it gives the advantage more to the offense by having the timeout? The cardinal rule of coaching with timeouts is never take it when it's a greater advantage to the other team. I could even tell a real quick story of my last football play I ever coached, from when I coached high school football. Was a team, the short version is the team had just scored on a long punt return. We were up 8 points with no time left on the clock. They scored on a punt return. I turned to my assistant coach, the defensive coordinator. I said, your call. I said, you got the timeout, call whatever defense you want. It's up to you. And he said, I'm not giving them the chance to set something up. We didn't call the timeout, threw them for a 5-yard loss. We win the game by 2.
Well, that's
never give the offense the timeout that they need to set something up.
Yeah, but was it just me? And maybe because you were there live on TV. Boy, did it look like the Steelers defense was absolutely gassed. I mean, TJ Watt was holding his knees, and I didn't have his. I understood what you're saying, and I understood the theory, and I did think it was a little bit bad to call the timeout there. But at the same time, I felt like if there was a time where Tomlin felt things could get chaotic, and someone like a Terrell Edmonds might not be where he should be, and giving the guys a chance to get themselves some energy back. In that instance, I understood a little bit why he did it. And I know that breaks the cardinal rule that you said, but I guess I'm picturing myself, and we've seen it a million times. He doesn't call a timeout. Brady drops back. TJ Watt and Bud Dupree are both just basically playing. They're basically dancing with the offensive tackles. And then there's a big completion on a gaff down. I don't know. I see both sides. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I completely see what you're saying. And that is not something that I would have been able to see in game. I'm not quite to that point of the game of rewatching it again, breaking it down. And that happened in the end zone opposite of where my seats are. So it was really far down there that I couldn't see if they were really, I mean, if there was going to be a penalty or something like that where the players were just gassed, I would say it's a little bit more forgivable. The fact that they didn't give up the completion is definitely forgivable. But do you really want to give Tom Brady and Bill Belichick a little bit extra time to decide what play is going to really be best when they can only run one?
Well, no, but I also I don't know. I feel like from the defensive standpoint that this team also got a chance to make sure they were prepared because maybe they didn't have the personnel out there, or maybe they wanted, let's say, Chicolo to go in for Dupree to get some fresh legs out there, or maybe they wanted to change their scheme. I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it. I understand what you're saying, and hey, Tomlin, there's one thing that really chaps my rear end, and that is when the Steelers blow third quarter timeouts. That's you talk about timeouts in the second half.
Oh,
That really
yes.
gets
I
me
can't
going
stand that.
because you want your full allotment heading into the final frame. And if it means that you take a delay a game, I don't know. I have, I guess, in my opinion, because I didn't coach football, but I coached, and it's all about preparation. The delay a game penalty should never be an option based on the fact that you should always be prepared for what's coming up. You know what I mean? So for me, I understand what you're saying, and I think that's good. I think Mike Tomlin's got a lot of cleaning up to do on his sideline from a challenges standpoint, especially, as well as, you have now you brought up the timeouts, which is a good point as well. So,
Well, remember, that's what he did the week before in Oakland. He called the timeout before fourth down after stopping them for 3 straight downs,
yeah,
and then they come out and they score on it.
you're
So
right. You're
they're
right.
they're 50-50.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll go to my key matchup number 3, and this one is simple, yet it's so, so important. And it's something the Steelers have failed at repeatedly this season, and that is don't turn the football over. It's really simple. This is a game, and we said this last week. Brian and I did, and you saying you can't turn it over. When the Steelers got lucky, they lost the turnover ratio, which is the norm now for the Steelers. But they had two interceptions and they took one away, with Joe Hayden's pick. That the Steelers are going to have to win the turnover battle in this game. You're on the road. You're not, hostile environment. I think this is a situation where Roethlisberger has to play a clean game. Now, I understand that that second pick, you could say it might not have been his fault. Eli Rogers was supposed to drive his man off, and he and Brown, AB, kind of got jumbled there, and it got bobbled and picked. And so that's not necessarily on Roethlisberger there. He did overthrow the first one, though. He can't do that, period. Cannot do it. The Steelers are a team that has to really focus. I'm not going to say that they have to win the turnover rate ratio. If they just play a clean game, I think they have a really good chance of winning. I don't even know what their ratio is now. Are they minus double digits now, Dave? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Let's see. They were going into New England. I'm pretty sure they were -9.
Gotta be minus 10 now.
Yeah, that should make them to -10. But
Golly, that's awful.
yeah, don't quote me on that. But see, that statistic can be skewed completely because I remember a couple weeks ago when you all talked about, oh well, no team that's finished minus whatever has ever won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, you could play 16 games and in 13 of them you're 0 or +1 for just a couple of them. But then you have those 3 games where you're -5, -6, and -4. That's what's going to really, and those are games that you lost, and those could have been games early in the season. So it really, to me, I think it matters more as you're trending at the end of the season. And with the Steelers, obviously they're not getting a bunch of takeaways. They just haven't done that all season. So it's very important for them to take care of the ball and not count on the defense to get the takeaways. Because when the Steelers have more than 2 turnovers in a game, they are basically a 500 team, but on the road, they're only 17, 27, and 1. I think that's since Mike Tomlin took over as the coach. But when they get down to just 2 turnovers in a game, they're 500 on the road, and then they have a much better overall record. So you've got to come in very clean, at most 1, and then after that, you've really just got to take care of it.
Yeah, and I wrote an article that ran this afternoon. It was probably about I think a 3:30 published maybe, and it was about how is road Ben a thing of the past, because that's something the Steelers used to always talk about. Fans, I'm sorry, used to always talk about how poor Ben Roethlisberger played away from Heinz Field, and it's kind of tough. I basically went to this season because clearly they've played 14 games, 7 on the road, 7 at home, and I looked at just the averages of like completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio, quarterback rating. It's actually pretty even. Yeah, he's thrown more interceptions on the road, but he has a better completion percentage on the road than he does at home. Record's essentially the same. The crux of my article was essentially stating that I think Ben is kind of leveled out. He's not really good at home and really bad on the road. I wouldn't say he's really good either. He's just kind of consistently Ben. That can be good or bad, but I feel like road Ben is a thing of the, at least not this year. It could be a thing of the past. So for me, they're going on the road, and a lot of people are like, oh, Ben on the road. Well, not necessarily this year. When you look at the statistics, I mean, Dave, you see what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because I ran some of those statistics for you earlier this season. And before that game in Denver, they had a fantastic road record going on
Yeah,
for a while, especially if you take away playing in Baltimore.
yeah.
But they had quite the road streak going. So you can't put that on road Ben. I think he really has evened it out for the most part, which the thing that's tough is I'm much like you. I see the potential in this team. I see how great they can play. And it used to be, well, when they're at home, we'll get to see that. When they're on the road, we hope to see it. Now, we don't know when we're going to see it.
It could be, and then honestly, with this team, it can be one game, it could be a quarter, it could be a half. I mean, we've really seen it all so far this season, whether it's horrible starts to great starts and great finishes and horrible finishes. It's going to be up to this team to start putting it together. And I think that last game was a step in the right direction. They have not reached the end result yet. And I don't want people in the live chat or in the comment section of the articles for this saying, what are you talking about, Jeff? You're nuts. This team is inconsistent. Trust me, they're as inconsistent as it gets. But I think that the week 15 game was at least a step in the right direction. So there you have all our key matchups. We kind of strayed away from ground zero a little bit. That's okay. But now we're going to go into the player to watch, the key player, whatever you want to call it. It's the one guy, and it could be on either team, that is that guy that could really turn the tide one way or the other. It's the player to watch, the player that you think might have a breakout game for whatever reason. So, Dave, who is your key player for this upcoming game, week 16?
It's so hard to pick just one. I mean, that's the thing because you look at, do you want to say something like a Joe Hayden going up against a Michael Thomas who hasn't he's kind of been held in check the last few weeks. I
You can
mean, do you
only
want to
pick one, Dave. Come
I
on.
know. I mean, you could also look like a TJ Watt. Is he going to get to Drew Brees? So honestly, it's really going to come down to Ben. I
Okay.
mean, you have to say Ben because if he can take care of the ball, play clean, hopefully not have to throw the ball 67 times and and just not put the Steelers in a bad situation with any kind of turnover, that's what it's really going to come down to.
Yeah. You're right. That's it's the truth. I'm going to go a different way, and I think that if the Steelers are going to win this game, they're going to have to put up some points. And when the Steelers put up a lot of points, there's one player that is typically really playing well, and that's number 84. And I also look at the fact that if you didn't hear anyone listening to this, that Juju Smith-Schuster on Thursday left practice early with a groin injury. Now we don't know the severity of it. It could just be a little tweak, and they're like, "Hey, leave. Go get your treatment now. Practice is done for you." The Friday practice, how he does he practice fully? Is he limited? Will really dictate whether he'll be available. Got to think they're going to lean on the side of caution here if that's the case. But let's say Juju does not play, then Antonio Brown's going to have to step up. It's going to be Antonio Brown's show. And I think he sometimes thrives in that. I think he likes that pressure on him. And so I'm going to say 84. I think we've seen it before, and I've said it. Said it last night, and I've said it last week, and I've said it the week before that. I'm still waiting for that Antonio Brown breakout game. He's scored more touchdowns than he ever has in his entire career, but I want to see that breakout game, that game where all of a sudden he goes for 140, 2 touchdowns, something crazy. I'm tempted to even say, heck, he might even throw a pass because
Yeah. Oh, well, I'd like to see it more, not even as much the yards, because sometimes he's gotten a lot of yards because of the big play.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the number of receptions really up there. I would love to see that game again where he hits double-digit receptions.
It's been a while. I'm trying to think if there's even a time this season that What was the last
I
time he hit?
don't think he has this year, but I haven't
That's
specifically looked
that
at
is
it.
stunning. Now I know you don't know for sure, but if that's the truth, that's stunning. If he hasn't hit double digit receptions yet this year, because we know Juju has done it. I think he did it 2 weeks ago in Oakland. I think he had 10. But I know Ben's spreading the ball around, and I'm not against that. But at the same time, man, I'll tell you what, this is a game where if Juju can't play, Antonio Brown, it's your show. You got to take care of business. And so there you go. You say Ben, I say AB. They got to work together. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, to myself, that could be a handcuff situation in fantasy football. If you're not sure what listening, if you're don't know what a handcuff situation is, it's when you basically tie a receiver and quarterback together, handcuff them together. For every reception that the quarterback has to said receiver, you get points for both. You kind of double your money. There you go. Double your points, I should say. Hopefully, double your money. So now we go into our fantasy football segment of the show where we basically pick a player we're going to start and a player you're going to sit in the upcoming game. It could be for whatever reason. Now, Dave, I'm going to warn you, don't be a cop-out guy like Brian does and say that you're not going to play an injured player because that's common sense. As most people's fantasy football leagues are rounding out and are done, now we focus on your daily fantasy football, your FanDuel league, yeah, you stuff like that. FanDuel is probably the most predominant one, so we'll just refer to that. So, who's your player to start this week that you're saying, you know what, I got a good feeling this is a good money. Put your money on this guy. Who is it?
Okay, well, to clean it up, AB did have one game this year where he had 10 receptions. That was against the Chargers.
Really? Okay. All
Yes.
right.
So that's often forgotten whenever it's a loss.
Yes.
Um, I hate to double dip, but I think it's Ben again. I know that he's probably going to be one of those guys that's going to cost an awful lot if you want to put him in your FanDuel. But if you feel that the Steelers are going to be in this game, then it's going to be because Ben really has to step up. I like your pick of AB, but the only way AB is going to have a monster game is if Ben kind of has one to go along with it. So I would say, if you could maybe play in a lower guy somewhere else and you can get a little bit of extra um, to spare for your quarterback, I'd go ahead and go with Ben this week.
It's not, yeah. I mean, it's tough to disagree with that. If I were to go with a guy to start, and again, I'm thinking value here because Ben's going to cost you about 8,000. It might even gone up a little bit. It might be 8-2, something like that in your FanDuel league. If you're looking for someone that's not going to be as much money, but you want someone that can get you some points, I'm going to go with Jalen Samuels again. But don't expect a lot of rushing yards from him in this game. I expect the Steelers to use him like he was used in NC State this week. And if you don't know what he was done in NC State, he was their Swiss Army knife, as Mike Tomlin would call it, when he used to refer to Mohamed Sanu as the guy that can do it all. He was the guy that would line up at tight end. He'd line up in the slot. He'd do everything for him, and he got the football. He's great hands. I think that the Steelers, especially if Juju Smith-Schuster's out, they're not going to shy away from going five wide. Don't be surprised if Jalen Samuels is one of those players that's out wide, and he might get you some really good receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. I would say start Jalen Samuels because I don't think James Conner is going to play, and I think that Jalen Samuels is going to get a lot of touches. So the question with Jalen Samuels is, does he get into the end zone? That's the key. He did not get into the end zone last week, and if you're talking fantasy, you want those extra points. So, but I'm going to say start Jalen Samuels. I think he's a good guy to add, and he's not going to cost you a ton of money. Could be in your flex spot or something of that nature, and not break the bank, but it still could get you a lot of production. So keep that in mind too. So Dave, unless you have a disagreement with that, who are the players that you or player that you say you don't want them, sit them, not worth it?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say I do agree with that. I think, especially for the value, the Jalen Samuels, he's either going to have a big payoff or he's going to be like, oh man, he only got me a couple. But if you're not paying much for him, then that's sometimes what you expect. The one person that I would steer clear from, because I'm allowed to use guys from either team, right?
Yeah.
I am going to steer clear of Mark Ingram
Okay.
because even though he's more of their goal line back and everything else, with the Steelers have a pretty stout up the middle defense with their defensive line, I see The Saints seeing the success that the Panthers had early on in the game using Christian McCaffrey the way that they did, and that's got Kamara written all over it. So I think he's the player that they're going to have on the field even more this game. Watch Ingram end up getting 4 carries with 2 touchdowns because it goes in at the 1 yard line because I said this. But really, I only see that's the only way I really see him going off. I know they've tried to split it some with them a good bit, but I don't see when you go to match up against the defense. I see that I see Kamara being the much better play than Ingram.
Yeah, that's definitely I can, especially with Kamara in there, and he's such a good red zone threat as well. For me, I'm gonna say if you're gonna sit a player, there's some people that want to go with the 2 tight ends for the Steelers. You have Vance and Jesse James, and a lot of people that are constantly who do I play? I think the offense has definitely been trending towards Vance McDonald in the past few weeks, and Jesse James has gotten some targets, but they trust Vance McDonald, I think, more with blocking assignments and things of that nature. And so I would say don't play Jesse James. If you had the option of going with Vance, even though he has a little bit more money, I think he has a better production rate than Jesse James. And I think Ben Roethlisberger trusts him a little bit more as well. So take that to the bank. I'm going to say sit Jesse James. And if you have the option, start Vance McDonald because he's going to be, I think he's going to be another good target for you. So there you have it. Let's get down to predictions here. We go into predictions next. We always talk about the AFC North first. No one really cares about the Browns or the Bengals because they're basically, I know the Browns are not technically out of it, eliminated. They need like 3 teams to have ties and 2 other teams to basically lose. I don't know, in some ridiculous fashion.
I haven't figured it out exactly, but I do know they've got to win both their games. Baltimore has to lose both their games. Um, Denver's got to lose one, and then you got the Colts and the Titans that are both a game and a half up on them. And the problem is they play each other last week of the season.
Right.
So not only do they have to tie that game.
Yeah.
And then there has to be some other tiebreakers in there as well. But come on, I mean it's easy to do the Browns and the Bengals. They play each other this week.
I really don't like the state of Ohio. I've stated that before. So we can do it though.
No, I mean we don't have to. I'm just saying. I mean you could
I'll
be
take the
quick.
Browns. I don't even know where the game is, but I'll take the Browns.
It's in Cleveland and they're favored by 10.
Well, in that case, if we're doing spreads, I'll take the Browns. No, I'll take the Browns straight up. I'll take the Bengals getting points.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll do the same.
Okay, now let's get to the important game. Saturday night, 8:20, the Baltimore Ravens travel to the LA Chargers in a huge game for both teams. The LA Chargers need this to keep pace or put some really heavy pressure on the Chiefs as they play on Sunday night against the Seahawks for that AFC West and top seed. It's hard to believe the Chiefs, who were like the top team in the AFC the entire year, if the Chargers win and the Chiefs lose, they're all of a sudden going to be the 5th seed. It's just crazy to me. So I look at this and say that I think definitely it's going to be a tough pick. Who do you got? Baltimore Ravens or Chargers?
Well, first of all, what I can't believe is that this game is the spread's only 4. That I'm like, you mean to tell me that they expect a better game from the Ravens going to the Chargers than they do the Steelers going to New Orleans? That kind of surprised me, but I know a lot of people are very high on Baltimore's defense. But Melvin Gordon returns. He doesn't even have a designation for this game.
Wow.
So he will be back. Keenan Allen is questionable. So, but then again, they're not playing the Steelers, so who knows how, that's who he's going to take it to. Who knows what Baltimore would do? But they got plenty of other receivers. I think San Diego, after that gutsy 2-point conversion, go for the win. Let's try to go win this thing. They've got to be carrying that back into their place for a primetime game on a Saturday. So I'm going to go with the Chargers.
Okay. For some reason, I think you asked about the spread. I think the Vegas thinks that and I kind of agree. Excuse me, the Ravens, their game travels well. Especially now with Lamar Jackson, and he runs the ball so much, and the defense is good. So for me, I think that that's a pretty decent spread. And the Chargers, they're pretty consistent, I guess, if you look at the body of work for this year. I said this last night when we did our predictions there as well. I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to think that for some reason, somehow, some way, the Ravens find a way to win this game. Call it a gut instinct. I'm not sure, but ultimately, I think that the Baltimore Ravens are a team that is scrappy. I think Lamar Jackson is such a unique beast. And I don't want people to think that I want the Chargers to lose. I don't. I want the Ravens to lose. It's going to make the road into the playoffs easier for the Steelers. But if I'm giving my honest opinion, I think that I look at this Ravens team and I just think the defenses are really struggling with how to defend Lamar Jackson. It's going to be figured out sooner or later. I'm just not sure it's going to happen this week. Would I be stunned if the Chargers win this game? Absolutely not. But if I'm also going to be putting my money down, I'm going to say that I think the Ravens win. So there you go. I think it's going to put more pressure on they're going to put more pressure on the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon, I should say, which is another key factor here. By the time the Steelers, by the time their heads hit the pillow on Saturday, they should know a lot because the Tennessee Titans and Redskins play at 4:30 on Saturday. If somehow the Redskins are able to beat the Titans, it's going to basically end their playoff hopes. That's one less team the Steelers have to worry about. That does factor into this playoff situation in terms of the Colts and the Titans, who are continuing to hang around. And then obviously the Chargers, if the Chargers win, the Steelers then can clinch the AFC North with a win on Sunday. So we'll see what happens. But now we get to our big game, Saints, Steelers, 4:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What is the spread right now that you see?
The spread that I saw right before we came on, honestly, it was on Yahoo Sports. I saw that it was 6.
Okay. Well, that's right in the middle. I've seen as high as 7, 5.5. Let's go with 6. Um, what do you what are your thoughts? How do you see the game playing out, and what's your prediction?
Well, are you? Is it okay to do a Dave Schofield stat of the week when I'm actually on the show?
Yeah, go for it. It's your stat of the week.
Because no, I mean I've been feeding them to Brian now. I didn't know if I was allowed to do it if I was on here myself.
Hey, it's your stats, man. Go for it.
So when I look at stats, I basically it all starts with the words "I wonder." Thinking back on some Steeler games, I wonder what this is. I wonder what that is. I wonder what that trade is. And sometimes you just shoot me an I wonder. So I was wondering, I'm like, I know the Steelers have a pretty good December record. How are they for the very last 2 games of the season? And they are currently on a 5-game winning streak for the last 2 games of the season. The only team that's got a longer streak is Kansas City, who has a streak of 7. But I'm like, well, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back 5 years. Let's see how the Steelers have done in their final 2 games over the last 5 years. Well, remember some of the times they're resting players. Even though they're resting players, 9-1. They're 9-1 in the last 5 seasons in the final 2 weeks of the season, which means they really finish well. And that one loss was the Ryan Mallett debacle in Baltimore, which I was at that game. And I don't think I'll ever go back to that stadium again. But then I even look back further with under Coach Tomlin, and in the 11 seasons under Coach Tomlin, the Steelers are 18-4 in the last 2 weeks of the season, with one loss being, well, 2 losses in Baltimore, one of which was the one I already mentioned. The other was a Charlie Batch game where Ben and Hines Ward were rested. The Steelers have generally played really well to close out the season under Mike Tomlin. So with that being said, I got to put a little bit more weight behind that, especially, coming off the big win this past week. I'm going to be the homer. I'm going to pick the Steelers, and let's see, what am I going with here? I'm going with the Steelers 34-30.
Okay. I like those stats, and they do typically finish very well. And you think about last year, week 17 game against Cleveland, that was Landry Jones started. Juju Smith-Schuster returns a kick return for a touchdown. They had no business winning that game, yet they still found a way to win. So take that for what it's worth. Now, for me, I think that this game is going to be a little bit different than people might believe. I think that it is going to start out slow. I could even see the first half being a rather low-scoring affair. But I think in the second half, things kind of loosen up. I think that last week's game was a springboard and not a setup for a letdown. And I think that's those are the two teams or two basically thought processes that Steeler fans go through right now. There's they won last week against the Patriots, they never beat the Patriots, letdown game. And then there's those people that think, man, you beat the Patriots, you're on a roll. They're on a roll group. And so I think that the Steelers win this game. I think it's gonna be really close. I'm gonna say final score Steelers 28, New Orleans Saints 27. 1 point differential. I think the Steelers win. And I've said it before. And I don't think the Steelers lose again. I don't know what it is. I think the defense is rounding into form. Um, I don't think they lose in the regular season, and I think they go on a postseason run. I think this team is a little bit different than last year. I don't think they're as arrogant as they were last year. Last year, and I hate to say it, but number 26 was a big reason for some of that arrogance and that air of invincibility. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars smacked them right in the face, and then there you go, you're done. So I say 28-27. You said 34-30. Both of us had the Steelers winning. If you're watching live make sure that you let us know what your predictions are.
I got a couple questions about yours.
Sure.
So you're saying 1 point victory. Is it going to be touchdown to win, field goal to win, defense holding him at the end? What's your prediction?
I think the Steelers are going to see. I'm thinking about your stat about Roethlisberger comebacks and how it's never what was it 3 points. He never does. I think the Steelers are going to have a lead, and they're going to have to protect it. I don't think it's going to be a situation where it might be. It's unique. Sometimes I just think of a number, and sometimes I don't even put too much of a thought process into how they get to that number. But that's just the number that came to my head, 28-27. I could see this being a 30-point affair for both teams. I don't know what the over-under is in this game. I'm sure Vegas has it around 55 or closer to 60, maybe around 59. Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
I haven't checked the over one time.
Okay.
So,
if it was at 55, I'd put money on the over. If it's 60, I'd be that's tough. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really interesting. So
I see it playing out much like Cincinnati. I think in the last 3 or 4 minutes, the Steelers will be down a field goal. They'll get close enough to get the game tying field goal, but they'll be going for the touchdown to win it, and then just have to hold off a last second attempt that a field goal doesn't do it.
Do you have them as trailing in the waning minutes and coming back and winning?
I have them, trailing, but also in a position to where they're ready to tie, but go for the win.
Yeah. So I can't help but notice that we have an individual in our YouTube live chat, Mr. Carter Smith, who is based on his avatar, is a Saints fan, and that's fine. We always have some people from the opposition join our show and listen to the other side of the fence, and he keeps on stating that the Steelers are a different team on the road. Really, they're not this year. So I just want to make that clear. They up until their 3-game losing streak, where they did lose 2 on the road, 2 out of 3 on the road to Oakland and to Denver, they were a very good road team. Someone said they were better on the road than at home. So will it be difficult to go into the Dome and win? Absolutely. Is there a team that can do it? I think Pittsburgh can. I think they're going to have to really lean on their silent count. They're going to have to go no huddle. They're going to have to be creative on how they approach their offense. But I wouldn't chalk this team up to what they had been in the past, where when they go on the road, they just completely buckle and shut down. So do you have anything to say about that, Dave?
Absolutely. This is their biggest challenge. This is a bigger challenge in New England. This is why it's not a letdown game, because it's their most difficult opponent of the season. So the question is, are they going to step up and play the way that they can? And that's when I see the Steelers play their best, is when they're the stronger the opponent, usually the stronger they show up. But if you want to talk about trends and that they don't play well on the road, but you know what they do play well with? The NFC South.
Mm-hmm.
The closest game was the game in Tampa, where they had the big lead, but just had to kind of hold on at the end. And it's just progressed as the season went on to the game against Atlanta, and then even more against Carolina. That if you want to talk trends, let's look at that one.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think in the 3 games against NFC South opponents, Ben Roethlisberger's averaged about 311 yards a game, and I want to say his touchdown to interception ratio is 12-2. So he had great games against Atlanta and then a huge game against Carolina. I think that basically right now I see two teams that are in flux. I mean, everyone talks about how the Saints, you know, ever since that they haven't played as well since they lost to the Cowboys. I know those 3 games were on the road. I'm curious to see how they do. Sometimes teams get caught up with, they look good around midseason. Look at the Rams. The LA Rams are another good example of, in my opinion, some defenses that are starting to catch up with the offense. And that happens sometimes, especially as you get into the postseason. So, all right, here we go. We got some questions coming in. This is what we always do at the end. So let's go. Greg asked, if you win the coin toss, what do you do? Do you win or do you defer like we did, or you take the ball like
Oh,
we did last
is
week?
this because I wrote that article last week going into the Patriots game and I get asked this?
I don't know. You got to
I've
answer it now.
I deferred every single time I had a chance when I was a coach. That was always what I did. I'm like, let's put the defense on the field, make a stop. If there's any chance of starting slow, you don't want to start with your offense going three and out. I'll tell you that was one key from this past week is that the Steelers did not have a single three and out against the Patriots. So I can see it either way. You've got to do it based on your opponent. I can see them wanting to go in and trying to silence the crowd. I don't know that you're going to silence that crowd. I think your better bet is to try to take advantage of the crowd when they're still all in the restroom after halftime,
Hmm.
so that they're not back in their seats. Um, but at the same time, do you really want to play from behind against Drew Brees? So you know what? The defer the option. Don't even call heads or tails. Just let them decide.
Can you do that?
You know what? You could take the direction, but yeah, that's probably not the smartest thing to do.
No.
I will admit I have coached in games where the team has, instead of saying they defer, they said they wanted to kick off, and we actually received the ball both times at the for each half.
Well, that's
So you don't ever want to do something where you're going to pull that off. So
no.
I honestly, I'm going to show a little bit of faith in the coaching staff that they know a little bit more after practice this week of what they want to do, and say, you know what, I'll live either way.
Yeah, I think that this is a game very similar to last week, and I was not shocked that Mike Tomlin said take the football if we have the option. And it's what he said in his presser this week. I didn't want to give it to Brady. You don't want to give it to Breeze. You don't want to give it to them and have them have the option of going up 7-0 early in that game. You want to set the tone. You want to be the one that they're chasing. I think that in this game, if they have the option, if they win the coin toss, they're going to say, "Give us the football. We want to." Not to quote Matt House, but we want the ball and we're going to win.
We're going to
um,
score.
yeah. So here's another question, and I asked this question last night in our other show, and that is, will Chris Boswell make all of his kicks on Sunday?
If they want to win, he better.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what's your gut tell you? I mean, I could say
um,
that with anything.
yeah. Um, I'm going to give him a pass if he misses anything from 47 yards or further. I also don't know if they're going to give him a chance to kick anything from 47 yards or further. But he is in a dome.
Yeah,
There shouldn't be any other factors involved other than his own freaking head is his biggest problem. Um, we'll see. When he came out to kick that 48 yarder against the Patriots, I did turn to people around me and say, you know what? If he misses this, we just watched Chris Boswell's last NFL game. But he knocked it through, and let's see him have a long career. Let's say he hits them all.
yeah, I think he does. I think he if hopefully they have Sweeten back up there, and we'll see. Um, Here we go. How good do you think Jalen Samuels will be next year after he drops the traditional Steelers running back year two weight, which has happened? It's funny, but it's true. Le'Veon Bell lost weight after his rookie year. James Conner lost weight. We assume that Jalen Samuels will be put on the program as well. What do you see as the future of the running back situation when you have Connor and Samuels both healthy?
Um, I just like having the option that if someone goes down, you got the next man up ready to go. Um, the running game really comes down to the offensive line. It always has. Um, guys want to get big contracts. Guys want to hold out. You know what? It's those big boys up front that are making it happen. So as long as that offensive line is intact, it doesn't matter to me which guy you put back there. I think that they both have some great skill sets, and Randy Fichtner's done a good job of taking advantage of those. So as long as they scheme, as long as they block, I think the sky's the limit for either one of them. So I don't see them both on the field at the same time. I just don't think that fits well into the scheme of things. It's going to be a one or the other, but a shared workload is something, maybe a 65-35, 70-30 workload is something that I could see going forward next year.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do one more question here. I like this question. How often should the Steelers go 5 wide offensively in this upcoming game?
Do you have the stats of how often they did it last game? Because it seemed like they were in it a lot.
No, but I do have an article running tomorrow morning for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com on Ben Roethlisberger's comments about 5 wide and how he really likes it, how he feels that they have the weapons now with Eli Rogers healthy, with James Washington kind of hopefully, I shouldn't say kind of, with hopefully turning the corner and becoming a little bit more consistent. Then you throw in Ryan Switzer if Juju's healthy, Antonio Brown. You can even throw tight ends, Jalen Samuels. They have the weapons to run 5 wide, but there are some disadvantages to that. Pass pro, things like that. There's no threat of a running game because there's no one back there with Ben. He's all by himself. So they did do it a lot. I feel it was the 92-yard drive was all 5 wide, I believe, until maybe they got in the red zone. What are your thoughts on how often they should deploy that, looking at the Saints defense and how they run things?
I like them mixing it up with that. I think it's just when you get in trouble is when you do the same thing over and over again. And the fact that you don't know what they're going to do when they come out, whether they're going to go spread, is Rosie Nick's going to come out there at fullback? You just don't know. And you've got to be willing to do whatever you need to do whenever you need to do it. I think the key to the 5 wide is going to be right around 2:55 in the afternoon on Sundays when you'll know. And that's when they come out with their inactive list,
Yeah.
because that was the big surprise this past week when they activated Eli Rogers, brought him up. I just assumed, well, they're not going to bring him up and sit him. I don't think they're going to sit James Washington anymore. They never played Washington and Hunter at the same time. I just assumed Switzer's injury was worse than we thought and he was going to be out. But they went with all those receivers. They dressed them all. So are they going to do that again this week or not? And I think it'll be very telling when the inactive list comes out on whether or not the Steelers are thinking they're going to go with a lot of 5 wide or not. Because if they are, then you'll see all of them active again if they're all healthy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, health is going to dictate a lot, but I think the Steelers ultimately are not going to go into a game and say we're going to run 5 wide this game, or we're going to run our 31 personnel, or whatever the case may be. People switch the numbers around in different sects, but nonetheless, I think the Steelers are going to come out. I do like having a back in there because you at least have the threat of running, but we'll see how that pans out. Now, Ali Howard, who's a regular listener on our show, he's giving me crap saying that because I say that James Washington will have a breakout game every week. I thought last week, if you're going to consider what he's done so far, has he had a breakout yet? It would be last week. He had a good game last week. James Washington performed well. He made a combat catch on the sideline, which is what everyone said he was going to be doing as a rookie. Maybe like the Steelers, it's a stepping stone for him. He's going to get better from there. I don't know. What do you think from James Washington moving forward?
I think James Washington has got to show that he can do it week in and week out. Last week was great. Yeah, he didn't have a. Everyone's like, oh, he didn't have that many yards, but he had the most yards of any receiver on the Steelers. So that was one thing. He didn't find the end zone, but that combat catch down the sidelines, that was the catch that Steeler fans have been waiting for since the preseason. That's what we were told he could do. And I think that's what was most disappointing is that we hadn't seen that when push came to shove. Well, there he goes up in what was the biggest game of the year so far and makes that catch. So I think it's just he's got all the potential to go forward from that now.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. We both obviously picked the Steelers. We'll call us homers. That's fine. I live in that. I don't live in my fears, like Mike Tomlin. So if you got red paint, you paint the barn red, right, Dave? Isn't that what he always says?
Oh, that's one of them.
I know them all, man. I know them all.
And you don't want to paint with a broad brush.
Well, we don't want to paint with a broad brush, but if you do have a broad brush and you do have red paint, you want to paint your barn red, obviously. So, with that said, I feel that's a good ending point for the show. I thank you for stepping in. For Brian, I do want to incorporate you into some off-season podcasts that we're going to have worked up for like the NFL draft and stuff of that nature. Because, folks, if it's your first time listening, we're not going anywhere. We'll be around all off season. We'll be around all the rest of this season, in the postseason, in the Super Bowl, for the parade, you name it. We'll be there for it. Yeah, I said it. So make sure you follow us on all of our audio platforms. That's Art19, Stitcher, that's Google Play, that's iTunes, that's Spotify. We're everywhere. Type Steelers, and you'll typically find us in your first few selections. Also, make sure you follow us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search BTSC Steelers Radio, and then obviously BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. That's where it all happens. 10 articles a day, everything from podcasts to analytical stuff to commentary to the latest news. You've got it all right there. Your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news. So, Dave, thank you very much for filling in. We'll see you next week on another Steelers preview.